The following video depicts the installation of typical block trail flashing underneath and prior to the forming of a cast-in-place concrete wall or curb using MM6125 and Flex/F fabric reinforcing. In situations where cast-in-place walls or curbs are to be placed on a deck to be waterproofed with MM6125, a better flashing detail involves waterproofing the deck and sealing any rebar prior to forming the wall or curb. Hydrotech refers to this method of detailing as block trails, and it is preferred over flashing up either or both sides of the wall or curb, or flashing completely up and over the wall or curb. Before beginning the application of any membrane, the dowels or anchor rods should be prepped. A simple abrading and cleaning with a grinder fitted with a wire wheel is all that should be necessary. The main idea is to remove any surface rust or other contaminants from the surface of the bar. Surface conditioner should be sprayed on the surface of concrete decks at a very light application rate that will tan the surface of the deck, not blacken it. The surface conditioner should be allowed to completely dry, which should take no more than about 15 minutes. A rag should be used to wipe any excess surface conditioner off the dowels and to spread a very light application up the dowels. Application of the initial coat of MM6125 can be accomplished by roller, brush, or squeegee. Enough MM6125 should be applied to achieve a coat of at least 90 mils in thickness. Make sure to apply the MM6125 far enough out onto the deck so that the membrane extends at least 6 inches past the footprint of the subsequent curb or wall on both sides. Before setting the layer of Flex/F reinforcing fabric, the initial coat of MM6125 should be applied to both sides of the block trail. While it is not necessary to apply the MM6125 up the dowels at this point, be sure that enough membrane is applied at and around the base of each dowel, building up a fillet of membrane. A pre-cut strip of Flex/F should be set into the MM6125 on one side of the dowels, wide enough to extend out onto the deck fully with a 3-inch wide flap turned up the dowels. Set the Flex/F fully into the MM6125, smoothing it with your hands or a brush, minimizing any wrinkles or folds. The flap of Flex/F should then be cut or slit at each dowel. The loose flap of fabric is then set down into the MM6125 on the other side of the dowels. Making 2 cuts, one on each side of each dowel, and cutting off the small strip of fabric is the appropriate way to cut the Flex/F. If simple one-cut slits are made, the Flex/F is not able to lay flat around each dowel. The fabric bunches at the dowel deck interface, causing it to ride up the base of the dowels and forming wrinkles and voids. Additional cutting and trimming will then be necessary anyway to clean up the Flex/F. Additional MM6125 will be needed on the opposite side of the dowels to set the Flex/F on that side. Here, it is important to be sure all the reinforcing fabric flaps from the other side are completely covered in MM6125. The Flex/F reinforcing on this side of the dowels will not have to be cut around the dowels, as it will be overlapping the flaps from the opposite side, maintaining the continuity of the reinforcing. If you find that you are short of membrane for setting the Flex/F, simply add more MM6125 so that the fabric is fully set in membrane. Once the Flex/F is set on both sides, a top coat of MM6125 can be applied by roller, brush, or squeegee. This top coat of membrane should be applied to achieve a coat of at least 125 mils in thickness and completely coat the fabric reinforcing. This would also be a good time to start applying the MM6125 up the dowels. It may be advisable to switch to a brush to ensure that plenty of MM6125 is built up around the base of the dowels and to make sure that the membrane is applied up and completely around each dowel at least 4 inches. Membrane application is completed by top coating over the Flex/F on the opposite side of the dowel line. It is very important that all fabric reinforcing is completely covered with MM6125 before the end of each day or with the threat of inclement weather. At this point, there should be a good thick coat of MM6125 around each dowel. The membrane should extend up each dowel at least 4 inches and a good fillet of membrane built up at the dowel deck interface. It is not necessary to wrap the dowels in reinforcing or use a band clamp, as the dowels will be subsequently encased within the concrete curb or wall. Prior to setting the Hydroflex protection sheet in place, strips of Flex/F should be cut and laid into the top of the MM6125 FR membrane. These strips of fabric should be set to the outside of the subsequent wall or curb's footprint. These strips will act as a release sheet for the protection course when the time comes to continue waterproofing in the field out away from the wall or curb. Please also note that where the subsequent wall or curbs will butt up to a building wall or other penetration, the same detailing just completed on the deck should be extended up the wall. Hydroflex protection sheet is then set into the membrane, butting up to each side of the dowel line. Later, after the curb or wall has been cast and the concrete forms removed, and prior to starting the field application of the MM6125 FR membrane, the protection sheet extending out from under the wall or curb must be cut away so that a membrane-to-membrane lap or tie-on may be made. This should prove rather easy, given that the Flex/F release strips were installed previously. It is important to be careful and use a hook knife to cut off the Hydroflex so as not to damage the MM6125 FR membrane previously installed. Just prior to applying the initial 90 mm field coat of MM6125, a propane torch may be used to lightly burn away or melt the Flex/F release strip. This will leave a fresh, tacky layer of MM6125, which is now ready to receive the new application of membrane.